Someone with 0 followers, 0 streams could tomorrow have the biggest song in the world. That genuinely can and does happen. Watching the field of, I don't know how many people, whether it's 150,000 or something like that, absolutely kind of going nuts to this music.
And the winner is Charli XCX. Come on, go!
Iggy Azalea
goes to Jessie J.
You said that at some point it just felt emotionally complete. What does that mean?
I think it literally just means...
Jon Shave, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
In this edition of Tell Beyond, I'm talking to a Grammy-nominated songwriter and music producer. With over 21 billion streams to his name and millions of record sales, Jon Shave has been shaping the sound of modern pop music for 2 decades. From his early days at Xenomania, where he worked on tracks for Girls Aloud and Sugababes, to co-founding The Invisible Men, and producing for some of the biggest artists in the world, Jon is known for his diverse catalogue across pop, hip-hop and electronic music. You were born in this village in East Bergholt, Suffolk.
Well, I moved here when I was about 1.
Not an
so
East
I was
Bergholt
actually
native.
born in Maldon in Essex, down the road. But obviously I don't really remember my time in that neck of the woods. So yeah, but we moved here when I was about 1.
And what role did music play in your family growing up?
It was huge. It was kind of our family identity was music, and it really kind of shaped all our lives, really. We all played instruments. We would, music was threaded throughout our lives.
Sounds like more than threaded.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, it was a massive part of my identity from ever since I can remember.
And what was your instrument or instruments?
So I started on the violin and kind of on the piano as well at the same time. With the piano, I kind of got to about grade 4, grade 5, and then I was absolutely useless at practicing. And my mum said to me, do you think you should give up? And I actually took the opportunity with both hands. But that then very swiftly led me on to actually songwriting for myself, because then I would just play the piano for pleasure, and I'd kind of work out songs that I knew and loved and work out the chords, and that's what led me into songwriting.
The fact of not carrying on with the piano or things like that wasn't a disappointment to your parents?
No, I mean, I definitely felt the sort of underlying disappointment from my mum in particular, but I kind of felt like it was probably, for whatever reason, I thought it was the right thing to do, and she was kind of like, well, if that's what you want to do, then let's do that. And I think she was very much of the school of thinking of like, you've made that choice, you have to then kind of live with that and see, and luckily, I actually feel like it was a really pivotal moment, that sort of giving up the piano, because it allowed me to reshape that whole instrument in my mind of what it's there for,
Reshaping the instrument, tell me about that.
Well, so rather than it being something that represents the practice I'm not doing and the trudging to London for the lesson and all the things that feel like antagonists in your life, it became something that at the weekend I would line up my favourite song of the moment on my Walkman and then literally play it over and over again and work out the bass line and then work out the chords, and then before you know it, you're able to play along. And then once I'd done that a few times, I realised I knew enough chords to kind of write my own songs. And so, yeah, the piano now is my main instrument, because that's how I write music. So that's what I mean. I think it just turned from something that I would begrudgingly do by force to something that I went to by choice.
Maybe your mum knew that.
Maybe, yeah.
So you weren't a kid that wanted to be in a band?
No, I mean, I tried it, but the band would consist of me sort of making backing tracks and then trying to tell everyone else what to do, which is kind of what I do now, So yeah, so I definitely tried it, but I was definitely I was really fascinated by the whole idea of being a record producer and a music producer. If I look back now on all those sort of experiments, it was definitely me sort of trying to suss that out, really.
So did you have a record producer or a music producer in mind as a teenager that was like, oh, I want to be like that person?
There was lots. I mean, because I used to spend, you know, any pocket money I might have, I would kind of buy tapes or records, and then I would kind of scour the inlay cards and all the credits, and got really into, you know, you spot the same names that kind of repeat, you know. And so I remember, I can't remember what age I was. I would have been about 8, and I think I got, for my birthday, I got a Duran Duran album on cassette, and I got a Madonna album on cassette, and then I saw across the two, there's this name, Nile Rodgers, that had produced the two records, and I loved them both, but they're both quite different. And now, you know, I know Nile Rodgers, and I know all about Nile Rodgers, and I love Chic and all his music. He's an amazing genius, you know. But that was the first time I remember thinking that, you know, who's this producer, and who is this Nile Rodgers character? And so, and we didn't, you know, obviously didn't have the internet, didn't have like this information at hand, so you kind of you just get little bits of info here and there, and sort of try and compile it in your mind, you know.
I think that's really fascinating, because if I think of myself at that age, I was looking at the lyrics, I was looking at the poetry or the words behind it, but you were looking at the producers.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at lyrics as well, but I was really, you know, the idea of being in a recording studio, you know, and it was set in Los Angeles or something, it just felt like this magical faraway place that I never imagined I would get to. You know, it was just this sort of fantasy world, really.
That's really, really fascinating, thank you. What's the thing that you hold with you most from your parents in what you do today?
I mean, the really sort of basic, obvious answer would be the sort of enduring of love of music, you know, and the sort of borderline obsession, I would say, you know, because both my parents were really obsessed with music, and you know, my dad was a real hoarder of sheet music, and we literally had a whole huge room that was literally full of sheet music from the floor to the ceiling, and then all the cupboards full as well, you know. But his idea of a good time would be looking at it and singing bits of it, you know. And so I think I'm pretty similar in different ways, you know, because I'm definitely obsessive about music, and it's sort of, I've definitely sort of designed my life around that, you know, rather than the other way around. So yeah.
So you told me before you almost didn't go for a music career, because I think after graduating you spent some time working in social housing.
When I was a few years into my music career, I was sort of experiencing a really bad case of burnout, and I just needed a break. And I actually then, at that point, got a job back in social housing, which was initially great at the time, but then I really missed music very, very soon. And then I had to figure out how to get back into it. So that was the whole...
That was a chapter.
That was a chapter, yeah, exactly.
When you got to London, you started off in a music law firm. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of by accident, really. I kind of, again, I had my amazing gift for typing, but I didn't have any contacts in the music industry. And I really wanted to write songs. I really wanted to try and produce songs. That was my sort of number one goal and aim. But I had no idea really how to get into that. So I just thought, well, probably I could do worse than try and get some kind of office job in and around the music business. And I went to a recruitment agency who the same day they sent me for this job at this music law firm. And I remember thinking at the time, well, it's not really what, you know, I would kind of would have preferred to have gone to a record label or something like that, and it's probably, I'll give it a few months, you know, and it'd probably be really boring, and then I'll try and find something else that's maybe gonna... But I was completely wrong, because actually the music law firm it's basically a microcosm of the whole music business. So you have kind of every label, every publisher, artists, managers, other writers, producers, they're coming through the door every day. And not only that, I was, you know, typing up all the contracts. I was learning how contracts were working. I was hearing all the demos, I was hearing what was getting signed for how much by who and what it sounded like, which really spurred me on as well, because that really made me feel like I could compete here. I feel like I could do something that could be as good and maybe better, you know.
It was like the curtain had lifted from the idea it was a rarefied world that...
Yes, yeah. And that was a completely lucky thing, really. I kind of shudder to think if I hadn't gone there, where would it, you know, because had I ended up somewhere, say, I don't know, say in a label, or say where there was sort of enough things there that you get into a comfortable situation, that wouldn't have spurred me on. Whereas I feel like there's definitely a real combination of elements of being at the law firm that really propelled my own kind of desire and sort of motivation.
How would that have happened in the record label, that you'd have got comfortable? How does that work for people?
Well, I mean, to be blunt, I guess if you have a job that's exciting, you don't want to leave it, maybe, you know. So it could be as much as that. You know, I loved the people I worked with at the law firm. I really just knew the job was not what I wanted to be doing, and it built up a lot of frustration in me. You know, I remember coming home every night, and I would come home every night, and I would try and write songs. That's what I was trying to focus on. But I remember really feeling like, when's this gonna happen? You know, and because you just don't know. It could easily not have happened. You know, I could have played my demo to people and could have been like tumbleweed. You know, so yeah, I think it was that sort of. So what I mean by that is that combination of kind of slight discomfort with then the carrot that is sort of there being dangled all the time. You know.
So tell us about the object you brought in.
So you asked me to bring an object that's travelled with me. So the main object I would have loved to have brought was my piano.
Your grand piano.
Well, it's not a grand piano, it's an upright piano, but it's the upright piano that was in my parents' house that I grew up playing and I wrote my first song on, and is now in my studio at home.
Sounds like a song by Sampha.
Yeah. Yeah, I love having that with me, because it's not only does it have all the memories, but it's an ongoing thing.
It's a living instrument.
It's a living instrument that I still play all the time, and get so much from it, you know. Anyway, I couldn't bring that, unfortunately. But I was thinking, well, what can I bring? And I did think I think it was when I was about 8, and I was just kind of getting obsessed with pop music, and I asked my parents for a synthesizer for my birthday, and this is what I got.
Wow, a Casio! Tell me about this.
Well, I don't think I was very good at masking my disappointment when this is what. Not that I was ungrateful, but it plays one note at a time, and it's got one demo song on it, and you can record your own melody. Probably, I think it's up to about 20 notes, you know, and it's got several sounds on it: piano, fantasy, violin, or flute. But I used to play on this for hours and wish it was one of the big keyboards you see on top of the pops.
In your head, it was.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm not massively sentimental. Like, I don't necessarily cling on to that many things, but I've always clung on to this because it's just always a nice little reminder. And there's actually a little drum beat on there. I think it's called Rock 2, which, if you listen to the first Deee-Lite album, there's a song on there which samples that drum beat on there, and it sounds amazing. And then, so yeah, I was really glad when I heard that. I was like, oh,
somebody else understands.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
After your abortive career in music law, you then worked as a studio apprentice at...
About 18 months into that job, I kind of got to a point with having a demo on CD that I kind of felt okay enough to play to people. I started playing it to anyone I could kind of get to listen. And there was one of the clients of the law firm was a producer, and I had played him my demo, and he then played it to a couple of friends of his who called me up and actually offered me a room of my own in there. They had a studio complex, And I was sort of there half as a kind of assistant, but also one of the guys at the time, this is very much of the era, but they were both South African, they were both in London, over from South Africa. And one of the guys ran a business in South Africa that was based on making remakes of popular songs in America or UK and then selling them on CD in South Africa before they'd come out, because it was before digital, it was before iTunes and that kind of era. So it's basically covers. That's how I'd kind of pay my way. I'd make these covers for him, and then I'd write songs in my spare time. Really getting into the nitty gritty of like all the different sounds that make up these records and trying to get it to sound exactly the same. I feel like that taught me so much. Before I'd gone there, I'd had a meeting with this guy called Brian Higgins, who was another client of the law firm, and we'd got on really well. And I think, you know, he'd kind of shown a bit of interest in what I was doing, but I think it was really early for him because I was very green. And but then when I saw him about 6 months later, and I think he could see how much I'd come on, and then he kind of offered me a place in his team, which was Xenomania. And the day I started there was the day that a song called Sound of the Underground was released, which was, you know, big #1 record over here, but it also started his relationship with a band called Girls Aloud, which then, so from that day I started to when I left 4 years later, I think I'd worked on something like 20 top 10 singles for him during that period. So it's like in at the deep end, sink or swim time.
You've said elsewhere that Xenomania ended up showing me where the bar was for when I considered a track to be finished.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So when you're kind of making records, so that's the kind of actually the nuts and bolts of the production and the recording, and exactly when you're actually doing that, it can be really difficult to know when it's actually finished, because especially if you've poured hours and hours into it already, you can sort of hit a brick wall where you kind of feel like, well, it must be finished because I can't think of anything else I can do. But that was what was amazing about working with Brian, is he had that kind of that zoomed out view all the time. So, you know, even if someone like me thought something was finished, or one of my colleagues, he would be the one to say, yeah, that's done, or it's not done. And quite often it wasn't, and he would push and push until he was happy with it, you know. And so I think it's sort of that, it's sort of that level of kind of keep going until it's perfect, really.
The roll call of musicians that you yourself have worked with as a songwriter and producer: Charli XCX, Swedish superstar Benjamin Ingrosso, Zayn Malik, Ellie Goulding, Britney Spears. You must have learned a lot working with these Premier League musicians and singers. Is there anything that when working with them you've decided, I'm taking that with me to do myself?
Well, the thing that springs to mind is, I think that, so certainly, you know, amazing artists, of all of which those obviously are, but to be an amazing artist is really hard, and it's really, you really have to back yourself to a degree that can be really uncomfortable and cause prolonged periods of pain. And I almost feel like that's why these people are brilliant at what they do. And that's something I always remind myself of, because you know, I'm also trying to create art as well, you know, and I think it can be, you can forget when you're behind the scenes. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of, you know, commercial realities and sort of things that can pull you in different directions. But I'm always super inspired when I'm around people that just really kind of believe in themselves to the degree where they're just super bold in their decision making. Always try and remind myself of that.
So they walk through the fire to get where they want to go?
Absolutely, yeah. You've
talked about when you collaborate with more established artists, you have to know that you're a custodian for their world and their project. Tell me about what that means. That sounds an interesting way of putting things.
Well, I think when you're kind of, if you're coming to a project that, you know, is an established brand and it's an established known entity, that brings with it a whole load of baggage in terms of people's expectations, you know, what the fans want, what they don't want, what you're basically in a world of opinion, and so for someone who's doing my job, you have to take that on. You almost have, and you have to choose which bits to listen to and which bits not to listen to. But also, it's a bit like the Steve Jobs quote of you have to kind of invent something that people don't know they want. So that's kind of what I mean. I think it's like it's being really respectful of the legacy of the artists that you're working with, but then also trying to bring something new.
Does that carry a weight of responsibility?
Absolutely, yeah. It can be a lot of pressure, and that's why I think it's really nice to balance that with working with newer artists where you're kind of inventing something together, because that's just a whole different set of responsibilities, but it can be a lot lighter and I mean, both are really fun, but it's just having that balance, I think.
So I was listening to you talk about your work with the Charli XCX song So I, and you said that at some point it just felt emotionally complete. What does that mean?
I think it literally just means all the kind of feelings you're looking to get from a piece of music we were getting. And I think when I said that, I was talking about it didn't necessarily even have full lyrics, but that the feeling of the music with the sort of the vocal sketch, which didn't have full words to it, it was giving the emotion that we wanted to get, basically.
Obviously, you've been at the Grammys in LA this year. Do you allow yourself to celebrate?
I did this year, actually. Yeah, I'd been 10 years ago, and I'd found it. It was just quite anxiety-inducing. It's such a big, overwhelming event, but also, I don't know. I feel like if you go into it with a sort of certain mindset, it can really easily become not very enjoyable, and a lot of that is kind of tinged with I definitely felt like, oh, I'll probably never be here again, So it's like the sort of combination of like, it almost feels like you have FOMO even though you're there, kind of thing. And I kind of went into it this year, with the benefit of being 10 years older and just really with a completely different mindset of just like, again, may never get there again, so I'm going to enjoy it, and that for me, it was a super low-key experience, really. It was kind of, but it was just being really present and just kind of really appreciating it and feeling really grateful and thankful to be there.
What do you think your mum would have said, seeing you in that white suit?
I think she would have liked the white suit. Yeah. I mean, these are things where I wish they were around, because they're big things that I mean, they would have loved it, but.
She would have said, son, you were right to give up those piano lessons.
Yeah. Yeah, that final vindication of mine. Yeah.
Many years ago when we were speaking, you were saying at the time that to make a hit song or to produce a hit song, there is also a checkbox of things that you needed to get right. This is, let's say, early 2010s. Even though art is art and the fans are the fans, is there a long list of things in the back of your mind that you're trying to hit, of which emotional completeness might be one of them?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's very telling that conversation is from the early 2010s, because everything has completely changed since then. And it's even to kind of talk about this, mythical thing as a hit in this day and age feels kind of like off kilter in a way, because in the early 2010s we were, it's a sort of very gatekeeper-led environment, and whether that is, music radio, music press, it was all kind of marshalled by gatekeeper figures that would basically decide whether they would support your music or not. And that whole system has kind of been completely disempowered, really, and we're now in a situation where TikTok in particular is such a powerful platform that really no one knows where the next hit is coming from. And there's something very exhilarating about that, because rather than having a checklist like you described it, which definitely in the old days it could feel like that. Now it feels like it's really good for creativity potentially, because because it can come from anywhere, and someone with 0 followers, 0 streams could tomorrow have the biggest song in the world, and that genuinely can and does happen. And then all the kind of the gatekeeper figures who used to kind of be in charge now play catch up with that, and now it's kind of like, oh, we'll play that now because it's kind of huge online. So it's completely, there's been sort of seismic shift really. But in terms of TikTok influencing the creative process, I think you can get into a thing of thinking like, this will work really well on TikTok, and it never does, you know? So my only thing is like, don't just literally focus on what feels great to the people around you at that moment. And then if you're all jumping up and down with excitement, then it's pretty likely some other people will. But that's the only bit you can really control, I think.
It's whether you think it's good and the people in the room agree with you.
Yeah.
That's a good basis for art in general.
Yeah, exactly.
What role does music play now in your own life and family outside work?
Outside work, it's a weird one because I don't have this big dividing line between work. I feel like my work is me and I am my work, so it doesn't really begin and end. With my 2 children, I don't at all. I kind of am letting music find them if they want it, and that so far they're kind of showing signs of being completely disinterested in
self-protection.
Certainly in terms of what I do, they're not interested. My youngest son is I think he's really musical, you know, but he'll find it himself if he wants to do it. And I still really enjoy music, you know, so it's like I've definitely had phases in my life where I, you know, if when work ends, I just don't listen to music, you know. I couldn't imagine anything worse to do, but I'm not in that phase anymore, I think, because I think I'm just really enjoying what I'm doing, really.
You went to Glastonbury earlier this year, so it was for pleasure?
Absolutely, yeah. It was such a special year to be there as well, obviously, with Charli doing her show, and it felt really charged because of that. And I just felt very appreciative and lucky to be there, and it, you know, watching a field of, I don't know how many people, whether it's 150,000 or something like that, absolutely kind of going nuts to this music. It was, you know, I can't imagine. I may never be in that situation again, so I really enjoyed it.
You went out on your own in 2023.
Yes.
And you stopped working in a collaborative production environment.
Yeah.
Was there a point in the first year where you got the jitters?
I think the jitters mainly came before sort of making that decision, because it had been kind of on my mind for quite a while that it was something I'd never tried my whole career. It's like I'd always worked in teams. I'd always been a part of a bigger organisation. And I think I had kind of got to a point where there's like an itch that I felt at some point I needed to get to, you know. And but it was very, very nerve-wracking beforehand, because it was all I'd known. But actually, once I'd done it, and sort of had all the sort of necessary conversations and everything, it was pretty great, to be honest. I mean, the first session I did on my own was with Charli for the Brat record, so it kind of was an amazing way to hit the ground running, really. And even if it hadn't become the you know, the sensation it was, just certainly creatively, just for that to be the first thing I was doing, it really just set an amazing tone, really.
Because you were on your own, but in fact it's women you'd worked with for 15 years, an artist you'd worked with for 15 years. Yeah,
that's the thing. And that's the benefit of when you've done it for this long, is, you know, you get a great network. So, you know, I'm lucky in that I'm never short of people to either chat to or send ideas to, or say, you know, do you want to get together, or should we write something, or, you know. So that's what's nice about when you've done it for a long time.
So do you have a vision of becoming a production environment with other people working for you?
I don't particularly, because I kind of have done that, you know, kind of with Invisible Men, we did a lot of that nurturing, developing young producers, and to great success. You know, we really worked with some amazing people who went on to do amazing things after they worked with us, you know, and but there's something naturally within that really, as you know, I'm first and foremost a sort of creative person myself. It becomes the balance where you're kind of focusing more on, you know, developing someone else's work than actually originating and being truly creative yourself. And I think what I'm enjoying right now so much is just getting to kind of see ideas through from start to finish, and there's something endlessly fascinating about that to me, and I think that's because I did so much of the other sort of development work with other people earlier on. So no, I'd say no plans at the moment. I'll never say never, but I'm kind of...
You're enjoying being the master of your own destiny,
yeah,
and the creative destiny.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So you've said with Sonics, I feel like whatever you've just done, you should do something completely different. What does the future hold for you, Jon?
That's impossible to to answer. I don't know. 2.5 years into this kind of my era, this current era that I'm in, and I'm really, really enjoying it, and I just kind of want to do more, really, of the same. So obviously the music business is ever changing, you know, and it's changing. Sort of the pace of change is becoming more rapid as the years go on. So I'd be a fool to try and predict, I think. But I think I'm sort of optimistic in that I feel like if you kind of stick to your kind of principles and try and, you know, yield the benefit of the years that I've been doing it, then I feel like you can't really go wrong. So you
want to create, and you're happy if there's change involved.
Yeah.
Jon Shave, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.